service that leads to surrender. Who is a disciple designed to be? What is he designed to do? Where is a disciple designed to go? First, we're going to look at the be of the be, do, go. And it's in Matthew 5, verses 13 and 14. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Be a servant. Fill that in. Be a servant. Why is a disciple a servant? Well, we can go back to the ending of this passage, which we'll talk about more in depth, that it's about good deeds. Good deeds. So Jesus uses two substances to describe the identity of a disciple. Write this down, the identity of a disciple. And he uses salt and light. Now, here's what we got to get out of those verses. Guess what? Salt doesn't lose its flavor. Light can't be hidden. So the command is not to be salt and light. A disciple of Christ already is salt and light. The command is this: do not dilute the salt or hide the light. Write that down. The command is to not dilute the salt or hide the light. These would be marks of pretense, of pretending, of a false disciple, of not getting it right. You see, salt was mined from the earth. You are the salt of the earth. It was a valuable commodity in ancient Palestine. Wars were actually fought over salt. In the Old Testament, salt was used for covenants, and it was also used in the sacrificial system for confessing and repenting of sin, and for worshiping. Salt was used in the sacrificial system as well as covenants, and it was used for confessing and repenting of sin, and as well as worship. It's an interesting little sidebar. It's the horizontal, side to side, my relationships with other people, coming at the intersection of the vertical, my relationship up and down, my relationship with God. So a disciple is a servant of the new covenant. A disciple lives a life of serving and confessing his sin, repenting of his sin, and worshiping God. Now, light is Scripture's metaphor for spiritual life. Light is Scripture's metaphor for spiritual life, for the spiritual vitality of eternal and abundant life. And we know that Jesus is the light of the world, and when we surrender to him, we reflect that light. It's John 8:12. Jesus says it so beautifully. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me, whoever surrenders to me, will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus is the light of the world, and when we surrender to him, we reflect that light. So here's what I want you to get. Salt and light are servants to the masses. Salt and light are servants to the masses. Now, what's the opposite of a servant? How do I dilute the salt or try to hide the light? And the way I do that is to lord it over others, to dictate it over others, to kind of come at relationships and tasks from the top down. But a servant comes from the bottom up. He literally bends the knees of his heart. And Jesus really said this so eloquently and clearly. He said, to lead, we must serve, not lord it over from the top down or dictate it over others. It's 2,000 years ago is the same thing that we have today, the same kind of circumstances in that Greco-Roman culture. And we're going to see it in Luke 22, verses 25 through 27. Luke 22, verses 25 through 27. Jesus said to them, the kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. Hey, look at me. But you are not to be like that. Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules, NASB says the one who leads, like the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. Jesus came as a servant. Servant is the most frequently used title printed on the business cards of biblical characters. Abraham, a servant of the Lord. Isaac, a servant of the Lord. Jacob, a servant of the Lord. Moses, a servant of the Lord. Joshua, the Lord's servant. Job, God's servant. Mary, the Lord's servant. And so I started thinking about this for my own life. Thought about it this week. Thought about it when we did this series in Common Ground. I thought, well, there's a lot of times in my life where I'd kind of like to lord it over others. Kind of like if my spouse uses a tone, but I'm ultra sensitive, and I think, ooh, I don't like that, or I'm sensitive. Or if my teenage children make a relational withdrawal without making a relational deposit. You know, there's something inside me, or if I'm doing an auction and somebody just doesn't get what I'm doing and they try to tell me to do it differently, or whatever it is. I started thinking, well, what would happen if I would look at this differently, if I would look at it from being a servant, and if I would say this, I am a servant of Christ. I am a servant of Christ. So in those challenging moments when you get a little pushback, instead of having that tension come up inside and starting to lord it over others, what would happen then if I would just say to myself, I am a servant of Christ. How do I serve Christ here? Now, I might not get an A+ at this, but I started thinking in these relationships, when I would feel a little pushback and it started to push back inside me, I think, wait a minute, I'm a servant of Christ. How can I serve Christ here? Wait a minute. I'm a servant of Christ. How can I serve Christ here? That's my identity as a disciple of being in Christ. And I felt differently. The people I think who encountered me felt differently. And there's something that happens inside the heart of all the people involved when we start to see ourselves as a servant. Rick Warren said, you know if you're a servant when you realize how you feel when you're treated like one. You know whether or not you're a servant when you realize how you feel when you're treated like one. And that's challenging. And so, what about you? Maybe you're a dentist and somebody tells you how to do dentistry and they've never had the first credit hour of dentistry school. What if you said, I'm a servant of Christ? Maybe you're an attorney and you're getting advice from a customer, from somebody you represent, and they've never had the first law book ever enter their hands. And you would say, well, instead of pushing back and lording over, you say, well, I'm a servant of Christ. What if you're a weatherman and nobody understands whether they come to you and tell you how you got it wrong? What if you would say, I am a servant of Christ? What would happen to you if that perspective would change? What would happen in the relationships around you? That's a discussion question that I want you to ask. I want you to ask this. How would your perspective of seeing yourself as a servant change if you sincerely said, I am a servant of Christ? A girl heard this in Common Ground, and she sent me an email that next week and said, you know, to remember things, I wanted to do that because I do want to lord it over others. And to remember things, I had to write it down on my hand to remember it. And so I just wrote down, I realized I had written down, I'm a sock. People started asking me what that means, because she wrote down, I am S-O-C, servant of Christ. So I wrote down, I'm a sock. And she said, I got to tell you, my life changed. My heart changed. The people in relationships with me, they changed. And this was one of the most amazing things I'd ever experienced. But the problem is that we dilute the salt. We try to. And we try to hide the light when we lord it over others. So in your discussion groups, address this question. How would your perspective of seeing yourself as a servant change if you sincerely said, I am a servant of Christ? The B of a disciple is to be a servant. And so that's the identity of a disciple, is a servant. And Jesus uses salt and light to describe that identity. They serve the masses. And we're called not to dilute the salt or hide the light. And so in those difficult situations, your perspective would change, and I think people will change around you. And it did for me when I say, I am a servant of Christ. I am a servant of Christ. Next, we're going to pick it up on the do of a disciple. What's a disciple designed to do? And it's Matthew 5, verses 15, and we'll go to 16a. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men. Let your light shine before men. If you want to write it down, the do of a disciple is serve. He's designed to serve. That's what we're designed to do. And this is the initiative of a disciple. This is the initiative of a disciple. The identity of salt has the initiative of flavor. The identity of